Hey guys, let's go ahead and start everyone's favorite president normally, JFK. So go ahead and get your notes out. We're going to try and make this a quick 3 or 4 parter and then we'll be done with it. There's not a ton to talk about with JFK, but what there is really, really important. In fact, John Fitzgerald Kennedy is going to be one of this nation's symbolic presidents, and he came in with a campaign song from the one and only Frank Sinatra. So the first thing I want you to do is kind of just hear this, and it'll kind of set the tone for his presidency.
Everyone is voting for Jack, 'cause he's got what all the rest lack. Everyone wants to back Jack. Jack is on the right track, 'cause he's got high hopes. He's got high hopes. 1960's the year for his high hopes. Come on and vote for Kennedy. Vote for Kennedy, and we'll come out on top. Oops, there goes the opposition, girl. Oops, there goes the opposition.
Long story short, it said it right there. 1960 is the year. And so Jack Kennedy comes in as the Democratic nominee for the presidency after Eisenhower. Now, here's your very first slide. So pause it, get it down if you need to. 1960 election. JFK versus, who was Eisenhower's vice president? Of course, the HUAC committee and all kinds of other good stuff. That would be the one and only Republican Richard Nixon. Now, there's a lot of kind of interesting stuff about the 1960 election. I know you're writing down a couple things. The first thing you're writing down is this is going to be the first ever televised debate between presidential candidates. This is going to go down in history, and it's actually really an interesting story because it's the first ever televised debate, and JFK probably is one of the best looking presidents in, American history. Nice hair. He is going to overwhelmingly win the television audience's opinion. However, people on the radio that were listening to the debate thought that Nixon had won. The one thing Nixon did not have going for him is he's always, to be honest with you, a little bit agitated, but he had been sick the week before. JFK didn't mind somebody powdering up his face and using a little bit makeup on him to make him look better, and Nixon thought that was insane. So, long story short, a lot of people think that this is one of the most razor-thin elections in American history, and part of the reason for JFK winning is that televised presidential debate. He is going to be, here's some interesting first ever Catholic elected, and he will be the youngest president. His plan for the future, and again, you know that when presidents go for election, they say, here's my plan. He says, we are going to conquer, and he calls it, I need you to star it, circle it, massive circle and star it for me, please. I'll be checking for it. The new frontier, and it's going to kind of be interesting that he calls it the new frontier. We're going to watch his inaugural address, of course, the most remembered inaugural address in American history. Remember, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. Literally, this new frontier is this idea that there is a whole new idea of America. There is a new generation, and those generation can give back not only to the country, but to the world. And also, there's that thing about space travel. That's going to be kind of interesting, too. That's another new frontier aspect. Now, President Kennedy, the details. Go ahead and pause and get it down. First thing you need to know, he is a Democrat, so circle Democrat. He is the 35th president of the United States. He will serve from 1961 to 63. You notice that's not a 4-year term. I think pretty much everybody knows President Kennedy would be assassinated in Dallas, Texas, and his vice president would be Lyndon Baines Johnson of Texas, actually, and will take over in 1963. One thing that I didn't tell you, I kind of feel like a bad history teacher. One of the heroes of the Pacific World War II is actually in Massachusetts, he was a big hero. It's going to be Jack Kennedy. He served in the Navy. He was a P-3 cruiser, one of those kind of like little, I don't even know, I'm a bad, again, history teacher again, oh my god, I'm failing at everything. It's like one of those boats, P cruisers, and he actually saved a bunch of men on there was an accident, and he was definitely a hero. He was awarded, commended. So he basically jumps from that into politics. He becomes a senator from Massachusetts. He's probably going to be, I'll be honest with you, the most popular president there ever is, because he is hopeful, he is youthful, and his wife was really hot. The achievements and events of his presidency. If you just want to take and circle this, if you wouldn't mind calling this, basically his new frontier. This is his presidency in a nutshell. We're going to talk about the new frontier, the space race, the Berlin Wall will be built, the Alliance for Progress, or can we circle the Peace Corps is going to be a big thing we're going to talk about. His high point was the Cuban Missile Crisis, and I say high point in that he won the showdown with the Soviet Union about the Cuban Missile Crisis. He will start involvement in U.S. In Vietnam. He negotiates the first nuclear test ban treaty, and he would be assassinated by someone named Lee Harvey Oswald. Now, something that probably is not going to be totally tested on, but I think it's always very interesting, his first lady. Okay, first lady. I'm going to go ahead and check for her name in here, so make sure she has it. It's going to be Jacqueline Kennedy. Jacqueline Kennedy. She actually starts off as Jacqueline Bouvier, actually. She's a debutante. She's a photographer. But she's possibly one of the prettiest first ladies we've ever had. And their children will be unbelievably cute. Look at them with their little puppies. This is Caroline. And this is, of course, John Jr. Here's a very symbolic picture of John Jr. in the Oval Office peeking out his dad's door. By the way, that little door, super good quiz question for you, was added by a president who didn't want anybody to see his wheelchair. Think about who it is. That's right, FDR. Now, let's go ahead and take a look about his domestic program, if you wouldn't mind. So sorry, went a little too fast. His domestic program. Pause this and get it down for me, please. Okay, remember a domestic program. Domestic equals at home. The opposite of domestic is foreign, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But his domestic program, again, is called the New Frontier. For the first thing that he wants federal funding for education. JFK says for us to be this new generation, we need to be an educated generation. So education. He also wants to basically add on to Social Security. Remember, Social Security for people that are over what age? What age? 65. And remember, FDR's baby was Social Security. It's his legacy. Kennedy, being a Democrat, just like FDR, he wants to make sure that he takes care of the elderly, not only just with pensions, but he's going to circle medical care, please. You're going to put medical care together, and you get, what do we call it today? Medicare. Government intervention to a halt. With recession with tax cuts. He also wants to, and I want you to circle this one too, JFK is going to be one of the biggest presidents involved in ending racial discrimination. And we're going to talk, actually, one full day in class, we're going to talk about what he did for the civil rights movement. Established, here's some stuff he did for domestic, and kind of foreign a little bit too. Established a Peace Corps. I want you to make sure you circle the Peace Corps to help third world countries. President Kennedy honestly believes that it's time for, and so that song kind of got into it a little bit, it's time for America to have moral leadership. It's time for America to start helping other nations and third world countries in particular. So he takes and he puts the Peace Corps in these third world countries. And he has a couple different motives, not only for moral leadership, but think about it. If we help these third world countries help and improve their economies, they won't become communist. Like the Marshall Plan all over again, right? But this time with Peace Corps and volunteer. I don't know if you guys know what the Peace Corps is. In fact, I have a little bit of a slide right here. The Peace Corps, what in the world are you doing? Peace Corps services is for younger Americans to enlist in the Peace Corps, and they will actually travel to these countries and help them devote like maybe 2 or 3 years of their life and give back to the world by serving in the Peace Corps. There's another thing he ended up doing as well, and this is going to be big for civil rights. Make sure you star it and put civil rights out beside it. President Kennedy is going to do the Committee on Equal Employment Opportunity to end discrimination in the hiring of government practices. He's going to go ahead and pull another Truman. Remember, Truman tried to do this, but Kennedy actually gets a bill passed. Now, one thing I want to make sure we get into a little bit more detail on is that Medicare. So pause this, get it down. Now remember, Medicare, anything like that is probably going to be for elderly. Medicare, basis for Medicare, men 65 years and older, women 62 can receive assistance. Even the disabled can receive help. Working people start contributing now, and eventually you'll probably be eligible for Medicare. Sounds very familiar, doesn't it? Oh, that's because it is literally inspired and is eventually tied to the Social Security system. I will tell you that Kennedy's Medicare system is going to be added on by his vice president after Kennedy is assassinated by Johnson. We're going to add Medicare, and I bet you've heard of the other Medi something, Medicaid, because Johnson's going to want to help the lower income. Now, there's a couple more things we got to fit in just a second in this domestic program. This one's going to be huge. Make sure you put NASA's space race. Kennedy is going to be the one that basically catapults the launch to the moon. He is going to literally, in his address to Congress, May 1961, basically first ever big address he has to Congress, urge the country to make sending a man to the moon a national priority. And you know and I know, did we send a man to the moon? Yes. Houston, literally, we sent a man to the moon. One small step for mankind, one small step for, you know what I'm talking about. But with that, here's the quote from Kennedy. He says point blank, I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving a goal before this decade is out. And think about it. He made that in 1961. Circle that. Before this decade is out, he said, I believe we should land a man on the moon and return him safely to Earth. No single space project this period has been more impressive to mankind as this, or more important to long-range exploration of space. He says, I know it's going to be hard, basically. Estimated cost, oh man, look at that. Write it down. $7 to $9 billion. He says, I know it's going to take a lot, but we can do it, and we owe it ourselves this right to do it. You got to also think about this just a little bit here. What did the Soviets just send up into space about 5 or 6 years ago that made everybody in America kind of freak out? Sputnik. Now we're going to send a man to the moon. That's kind of like one-upping the Soviet Union, which eventually is, going to happen because we're obviously America. But with that, you have to think about that fact. This is, again, that Cold War competitiveness between us and the Soviet Union. And he said before the decade's out, 1961, guess what? We landed Neil Armstrong on the moon, 1969. So he made good on that promise, even though he wasn't there. Now, I'll be honest with you. The new frontier is, point blank going to be honest with you, impossible to complete. It's not going to happen. Even if JFK had lived, it would not have been possible. There are a couple things that are standing in his way. I want you to make sure you really circle an extremely conservative Congress. Remember, JFK is a Democrat. Conservative means Republican. The Republicans were out for JFK's blood, okay? They absolutely, positively did not want him getting another term, so they were blocking everything they possibly could, including his new frontier legislation like Medicare. Medicare won't be passed under JFK. It'll have to be passed during LBJ's term. It also is going to be disappointing a lot of civil rights activists, because I'll be honest with you, JFK is going to help the civil rights, and we're about to talk about that in the next video, but he doesn't just bold-faced come out for it, and that's going to really upset some civil rights activists. But I'm going to be honest with you, he did do a lot for civil rights. The basic thing, and this is what you wrote down, okay? The new frontier ideas, the big reason they're important is they would not be completed by Kennedy. Obviously, you can see he's a little bit tortured towards the end of his term. His picture's a really good view of the fact that he's trying, but he just didn't get anywhere because a lot of foreign stuff popped up. But I'll be honest with you, JFK directly leads to LBJ, Lyndon Baines Johnson, and Lyndon Baines Johnson is going to get a ton of stuff done for this country. So overall, cap out JFK's domestic policy. You have the new frontier. You have his family Camelot. You have education spending, the space race. You have tax cuts, hopefully an end to discrimination. The Peace Corps. Remember what the Peace Corps is. You've got Medicare trying to be pushed through. Lots of different stuff going on in Kennedy's White House, including a lot of ladies. We'll talk about that later in a little bit. Okay, tune in for video 2.